June 22, 1941. Engels, Soviet Union. The air in the recruitment office is thick with the smell of cheap tobacco and the frantic clicking of typewriters. Marina Raskova, the Soviet Amelia Earhart, stands before a sea of young women, their faces flushed with a mixture of grief and a terrifying, cold resolve. Operation Barbarossa has shattered the frontier, and the Wehrmacht is just knocking at the door. They are kicking it down. Among the crowd stands 19-year-old Nadezhda Popova. Her brother is missing. Her home in the Ukraine is likely a pile of ash. She doesn't want to nurse or cook. She wants to fly. But the Soviet military hierarchy is a monolith of steel and tradition. To the generals, the idea of women in the cockpit isn't just radical. It's a distraction they can't afford while the panzers roll toward Moscow. Stalin, however, is a man of cold pragmatism. As the Red Air Force is decimated on the runways, the Man of Steel grants Raskova permission to form the 122nd Aviation Group. It is a desperate gamble, a suicide initiative born from the realization that every able-bodied man is needed for the meat grinder of the front lines. But when the women of what will become the 588th Night Bomber Regiment arrive at their training grounds, they aren't met with Yak-9 fighters or Il-2 Sturmoviks. They are greeted by the Polikarpov Po-2. "It's a crop duster," one girl whispers, running a hand over the canvas skin of the fuselage. She isn't wrong. The Po-2 is a 1920s design biplane made of plywood and fabric. It has no radio, no parachutes, and no guns. Its maximum speed is a staggering 94 miles per hour, so slow that a modern German Messerschmitt Bf-109 would stall out just trying to follow it. The cockpit is open to the elements, meaning at sub-zero altitudes, the pilots face the very real threat of their eyelids freezing shut. The training is relentless. 18 hours a day of navigation, mechanics, and night flying drills. They are issued oversized men's uniforms and boots stuffed with newspaper to fit. They are mocked by the male pilots as little dolls. But Raskova's dolls are learning a lethal trade. They are learning how to navigate by the stars and how to drop 100-kilogram bombs by hand-cranking a primitive release wire. As the winter of 1942 approaches, the 588th is deployed to the Southern Front. The mission? Harassment. And they are to fly into the heart of the German lines, night after night, to ensure the invaders never sleep. The Germans have no idea what is coming. They are used to the roar of engines and the scream of Stukas. They are not prepared for the whoosh of the wind through canvas, the sound of a broomstick sweeping through the air. July 17, 1942. Near the Don River Southern Front. Oberleutnant Johannes Kaufmann of the 13th Panzer Division huddles in a shallow trench, the freezing mud seeping through his wool greatcoat. The night is unnervingly still, a rare silence on the Eastern Front. Suddenly, the silence is violated not by a roar, but by a soft, rhythmic whistling. It sounds like the wind caught in a wire fence, or perhaps the rustle of a silk dress. Whoosh, whoosh. Kaufmann looks up. The moon is obscured by heavy clouds. He sees nothing. Then, the earth erupts. A 100-kilogram bomb strikes the fuel depot 300 yards away. A second later, another blast shatters the command tent. There was no engine noise, no warning. Just the terrifying realization that the sky is raining death from an invisible source. This is the birth of the legend, or to the German soldiers. The sound of the wind vibrating through the wire struts of the Polikarpov Po. Two sounds exactly like a broomstick cutting through the air. They begin to whisper a name that will soon reach the ears of the High Command. Nachthexen, the Night Witches. The tactic is as brilliant as it is suicidal. Because the PO-2 is made of wood and canvas, it is nearly invisible to German radar. Because it is so slow, it can maneuver with a turning radius that leaves a Messerschmitt pilot cursing in frustration, unable to line up a shot without stalling his own aircraft and falling out of the sky. But the real terror lies in the idling approach. As they approach the German encampments, the female pilots, flying in pairs, cut their engines. They glide in total silence, 1,000 feet above the unsuspecting Wehrmacht, and the only sound is the wind. They release their bombs, restart their temperamental M11 engines with a desperate prayer, and dive away into the darkness before the searchlights can find them. By dawn, the 588th has flown 8, 10, sometimes 15 sorties in a single night. The ground crews, also entirely female, work in the freezing dark to rearm the planes in under 3 minutes. They handle the freezing metal of the bombs with bare hands. Skin often tears away, sticking to the casings. Stalin, receiving reports in the Kremlin, is initially skeptical. He looks at the casualty lists of his elite male fighter regiments and then at the mounting success of the dolls in their plywood toys. The 588th is becoming the most highly decorated unit in the Soviet Air Force. They aren't just harassing the enemy. They are breaking them, but the Germans respond with a desperate decree. Any soldier who shoots down a night witch is automatically awarded the Iron Cross. The suicide flight has become a hunt, and the hunters are starting to feel the heat of the German searchlights. August 1st, 1943. The Taman Peninsula. The horizon is a jagged line of fire and steel. Above the Kuban bridgehead, the sky isn't black. It is a crisscrossing web of brilliant, blinding blue-white fingers. Searchlights. The Germans have moved in specialized flak units, equipped with the dreaded 88mm guns and high-intensity carbon arc lamps specifically designed to trap the wooden biplanes. Pilot Galina Dukutovich grips the control stick of her Po-2, her knuckles white against the cold. Beside her, navigator Polina Gelman scans the ground. They are caught in a light trap. When one searchlight finds a plane, it signals the others, which converge to create a basket of light. Once caught, the pilot is blinded, the cockpit illuminated like a stage. "Dive!" Galina screams over the wind. She pushes the nose down, on the plywood frame groaning under the stress. To her left, she sees another PO-2, flown by her friends, erupt into a fireball. Because the planes are made of wood and doused in flammable nitrate dope, a single incendiary round turns them into a torch. There are no parachutes. To carry a parachute meant sacrificing the weight of one more bomb, and these women had long ago decided that the mission outweighed their lives. Back at the makeshift airfield, a flat patch of grass near the front lines, the tension is suffocating. The night witches are losing more aircraft in a single week than they had in the previous 6 months. Yet, as each plane touches down, the ground crews, teenage girls with grease-stained faces, scramble to refuel. They don't wait for the engines to cool. They can't. In Moscow, the reports reaching Stalin's desk are no longer about harassment. They are about strategic disruption. The 588th has destroyed railway junctions, ammunition dumps, and, most importantly, the German psyche. Captured Nazi documents reveal a growing superstition. The Germans believe the Soviet Union is injecting these women with experimental serums to give them night vision like cats. Stalin, the ultimate cynic, is stunned. He had expected these women to be a propaganda piece at best, a sacrificial lamb at worst. Instead, They are the only unit that remains functional when the weather is too foul for the real fighters to fly. The Po-2, with its low stall speed, can hedge-hop through fog and snow that would ground a Junkers. But the cost is mounting. Tonight, the 588th will lose 4 crews, 8 women. For a regiment of only 260 people, these losses are catastrophic. Yet, as the sun begins to bleed over the eastern horizon, the remaining pilots don't head for the barracks. They gather around a map, lit by a single kerosene lamp, planning the next night's route. They aren't just fighting the Germans anymore. They are fighting the very idea that they are outdated. September 22, 1943. Over the Blue Line, Caucasus. The Blue Line is a fortress of concrete and fire, the last German stronghold on the Taimane Peninsula. To break it, the Soviet High Command demands a level of aerial intensity that borders on the impossible. For the 588th, this means the carousel. Imagine a vertical circle of wood and canvas. As soon as one Po-2 releases its payload and banks away, the next is already in its dive. There is no respite for the Germans below. For 3 hours, the sky has been a continuous loop of whistling wind and shattering high explosives. In the cockpit of her biplane, Junior Lieutenant Irina Sabrova feels the vibration of the M11 engine through her boots. It is a temperamental beast, prone to coughing in the thin, frozen air. Below her, the German Flak-Vierling 20mm quad cannons are sowing tracers into the night. Long glowing ribbons of green and red that look beautiful until they stitch through a wing. Suddenly, a searchlight snaps onto her fuselage. "Irina, kick it!" her navigator yells. Sabrova doesn't just turn. She dances. She exploits the Po-2's greatest secret. Its stall speed is so low, under 64 kilometers per hour, that she can virtually hover in a stiff headwind. She pulls the nose up, bleeding speed until the plane almost stands still. The German radar-aimed guns, calibrated for the high-speed passes of Soviet fighters, overcompensate. The shells explode harmlessly in the empty air where she should have been. This is the suicide flight, in its purest form. To survive, they must fly so poorly by conventional standards that the most advanced military technology in the world cannot track them. Back in Moscow, the legend of the 588th has reached a fever pitch. Stalin, a man who famously said, "Quantity has a quality all its own," is forced to revise his calculus. These women aren't just a quantity. They are a psychological phenomenon. He receives a report from a captured German officer of the 19th Anti-Aircraft Division. The officer describes his men as nervous wrecks, unable to sleep because they are waiting for the quiet death that comes without an engine's roar. Stalin realizes that the 588th has achieved something his armored divisions couldn't. They have stripped the Wehrmacht of its sense of invincibility. The Untermenschen, the subhumans, as Nazi propaganda labeled the Soviets, were being led to victory by women flying sewing machines. As the 588th prepares for the final push into the Crimea, they receive an unexpected shipment. It isn't new planes or better engines. It's a crate of medals. The dolls are officially renamed the 46th Taimane Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment. The word guards is the highest honor in the Soviet military. They are no longer an experiment. They are the elite. But the elite must pay a price. In the darkness over the Kerch Strait, the witches are about to face their deadliest night yet. A night where the plywood won't be enough to hide them. August 1st, 1943. The Kerch Strait, Crimea. The black water of the Kerch Strait reflects nothing but the cold, distant stars, until the tracers begin to fly. This is the night of the burning witches. The Germans, humiliated by the sewing machines, have deployed a secret weapon. The Messerschmitt Bf-110G4 night fighter, equipped with Liechtenstein radar and upward-firing cannons known as schräge Musik, slanted music. Pilot Marina Chechneva feels the air thrum. Beside her, the sky suddenly transforms into a pillar of fire. A Po-2, hit by a burst from below, disintegrates in seconds. The canvas wings, treated with flammable lacquer, act as a wick. There are no parachutes. The crew, two young women who had been singing folk songs in the mess tent only an hour ago, are gone before they can even scream. They're hunting us. Chechneva whispers, banking her plywood craft into a steep, agonizingly slow turn. Tonight, the 588th loses 4 aircraft in quick succession. This suicide flight has never felt more literal. On the ground, the Soviet commanders are in a panic. They contemplate grounding the regiment. But the women refuse. They develop a new tactic on the fly. One plane acts as bait, intentionally drawing the searchlights and flak, while the second plane cuts its engine and glides in from the opposite direction to take out the searchlight batteries. It is a game of chicken played at 1,000 feet with the lives of 19-year-olds. News of the Kerch slaughter reaches Stalin's war room. He sits in silence, tracing the map of the Crimea with a nicotine-stained finger. And he had built his empire on the backs of great men. Yet these night witches are demonstrating a brand of fanatical bravery that even his most hardened Siberian divisions struggle to match. They are flying 15 to 18 missions a night, landing only long enough to cough up the soot from their lungs and take on more bombs. The stunned realization for Stalin isn't just their success, it is their endurance. The Po-2 was never meant for combat, yet in the hands of these women, it has become a precision instrument of psychological warfare. He orders that the 588th be given priority for fuel and munitions, a rare concession for a unit flying obsolete equipment. By the time the smoke clears over Kerch, the regiment has survived its darkest hour. They have proven that even a ghost can bleed, but a ghost cannot be stopped. And the push toward Berlin has begun, and the witches are leading the way, leapfrogging from one muddy field to the next, always staying just behind the retreating Wehrmacht. January 1945. The Vistula Oder Offensive, Poland. The Soviet steamroller is no longer a desperate defense. It is an avalanche. But as the Red Army crosses into Polish territory, the winter of 1945 proves to be one of the most brutal on record. The temperature drops to minus 30 degrees Celsius. For the pilots of the 46th Guards, the open cockpits of their Po-2s have become literal iceboxes. Nadezhda Popova, now a seasoned flight commander with hundreds of sorties under her belt, adjusts her goggles. The wind is so cold it feels like a physical blow to the face. To prevent their hands from freezing to the control sticks, the women wrap them in thick fur or layers of silk scavenged from captured German parachutes. The mission has changed. They are no longer just harassing the enemy. They are the eyes of the advancing front, flying low, sometimes so low they can see the terror in the eyes of the retreating German infantry. They drop flare bombs to illuminate targets for the heavy Soviet artillery. The Germans are in full retreat, but they are a wounded beast, snapping back with everything they have. The night witches are now operating over German soil. The psychological toll on the Wehrmacht has reached its zenith. Rumors spread through the German ranks that these women are not human, but vengeful spirits summoned by Stalin himself. The Iron Crosses promised for shooting them down are being handed out more frequently, but the witches keep coming. In a heated bunker in Moscow, Stalin studies the maps of the German heartland. He notes the 46th Guards' position. They are moving faster than his supply lines. They are landing in snowdrifts, refueling from jerry cans hidden in haystacks, and taking off again before the German scouts can pinpoint their location. Stalin's stunned silence has turned into a grim respect. He realizes that the 588th has achieved the impossible. They have turned a technical disadvantage, a slow, wooden, primitive aircraft, into a strategic masterstroke. By refusing to give the German soldiers a single night of uninterrupted sleep for 3 years, they have eroded the morale of the finest fighting force in Europe. As the spires of Berlin appear on the horizon, the night witches prepare for their final act. They have flown over 30,000 missions. They have dropped 23,000 tons of bombs. And they have done it all in a plane that was designed to spray crops. But the final victory will come with a bitter realization. The war is ending, and the world they are returning to is not the one they left. May 2nd, 1945. Berlin, Germany. The sky over the Reichstag is a choked, gray tapestry of smoke and ash. The smell of the city is unmistakable. Pulverized brick, cordite, and the sweet, cloying scent of death. For the women of the 46th Guards, the war doesn't end with a grand dogfight, but with a quiet, final descent into a scarred airfield on the outskirts of the fallen capital. Nadezhda Popova climbs out of her cockpit for the last time. Her face is mapped with lines of exhaustion and frostbite that no amount of victory can erase. She looks at her PO2, the sewing machine, now riddled with patches where flak had torn through the canvas. It is a miracle of wood and wire that it still stands. As the Soviet flag is raised over the ruins of Berlin, the night witches find themselves in a strange, jarring vacuum. For 3 years, their lives were measured in 800-meter intervals and the ticking of a bomb release. Now, the silence of the night is no longer a tactical advantage. It is a heavy, haunting weight. In the Kremlin, Stalin reviews the final tallies. The 46th Guards have produced 23 heroes of the Soviet Union. They have flown over 30,000 sorties. They have literally exhausted the German army into submission. Stalin, who began the war doubting their suicide flight, now understands that these women were his most cost-effective weapon. They required no expensive metal, no complex radar, and very little fuel. They offered only their lives, and they offered them at a rate that stunned the world's most advanced military. But as the victory parades begin in Red Square, a cold reality sets in. The Soviet Union is a patriarchal machine, and while the night witches are celebrated in propaganda, the regiment is abruptly disbanded within 6 months of the war's end. There is no place for a female combat regiment in the peacetime Red Air Force. The dolls are expected to return to the kitchens, the factories, and the nurseries, to trade their flight suits for dresses and their bombs for bread. Yet, they cannot be erased. The German veterans who survived the Eastern Front still speak of the Nachthexen with a shudder. They remember the whistling in the dark. They remember the broomsticks. The legacy of the 588th remains etched in the history of aviation. They proved that the obsolete is only a matter of perspective, and that courage is the ultimate force multiplier. Stalin was stunned not just by their survival, but by their transformation. They turned a suicide mission into a legend, and a crop duster into a nightmare that the Third Reich could never wake up from. As the sun sets over a rebuilding Europe, the wind still rustles through the trees of the Taman Peninsula. A soft, whistling sound, like silk on a wire, echoing the ghosts of the women who owned the night.